Interesting. Hello and welcome to the A-List webinar series for students, parents, and educators. I know we're getting started. My name is Anthony Sarchipone from A-List Education. Each week we discuss news and topics affecting student learning. During this webinar, we encourage you to ask questions, and you can submit your questions in the Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. If you're having any kind of technical issues or you'd like Dr. Hallowell to repeat something, you can put that in the chat function. Let us know who you are, where you're from. Are you a parent? Are you a student? Are you an educator? Our panelists will address your questions either during the talk or at the end. And now, you can, in fact, go ahead and say hi in the Q&A bubble. That'll get you familiar with it and let us know that it's working. You can just type in hi, where you're from, who you are if you like. Terrific, great. All of our webinar topics can be summed up in one question, and that's always been like, what is the new normal in education? Things have changed so much in just the past 2 months. But today's topic, the childhood roots of adult happiness, is one that really spans our pre and post-pandemic life. It's been with us always and will be with us always. As parents and educators, we have different career paths, life plans picked out for our children. We want them to be successful. We want them to be well-respected, comfortable. We want them to achieve great things. But above all, we want them to be happy and fulfilled adults, living the life they truly want for themselves. So how do we do that? How do we support them in that? Most of you attending today are familiar with our speaker, Dr. Ned Hallowell. He is a national thought leader, doctor, and speaker on ADHD. Dr. Hallowell will be discussing his Learning Bridge, a 5-step plan for how we, as parents and educators and student advocates, can support and foster a foundation of joy in children that grows into a lifetime of happiness. And learning and excelling is rooted in happiness and well-being. So welcome, Dr. Hallowell. I'll let you start.
Well, it's very nice to be with you, and welcome to all of you. I thought I'd begin by telling you where this program came from, where the what they're calling the Learning Bridge came from. When my wife Sue and I started to have children, our first one was born in 1989. I remember vividly the feeling of absolute incompetence. Here I was, a Harvard-trained child psychiatrist. I'd specialized in child psychiatry. But give me a little baby. Our first was named Lucy. And I didn't have a clue what to do. I knew all about the things that could go wrong. I was an expert in misery, all the problems children can encounter. But I didn't have a game plan for how to promote joy, happiness, the things that every parent wants. And if you ask a parent, what do you want for your children? The answer you universally get is, I want them to be happy. I want them to grow up to be happy, successful, fulfilled, stay out of trouble, meet good people. The list is always the same, but right at the top of it is happy. And I didn't have a plan for how to promote that. And I realized most parents didn't either. If they did, it was a very well-kept secret. And so what people ended up doing is repeating the way they were raised, or the opposite if they didn't like how they were raised, or sort of falling into place with what the others in their socioeconomic grouping were doing. And so you sort of learn from your neighbors, your classmates, schoolmates, and from your own childhood. And that's how people patch together their plan, if they even had one. See, I mean, you can ask someone, what's your financial plan? Or you can ask someone, what's your plan for the next 5 years? But ask a parent, what is your plan to promote lifelong joy in your child? And most parents will stumble because they haven't really thought it out. And for something as important as raising a child, maybe the most important thing a parent ever does in their life, it's better if you have a plan. So I set about trying to look at all the evidence I could find, and this was in the 90s, and so a lot of new studies were coming out that related to well-being and feeling good about life and about yourself. And I also talked to all the experts I knew. I worked in many schools, so I knew teachers and heads of school and other mental health professionals, and went through all the evidence and put together this plan, which is very evidence-based. And the good news is this works. The bad news is an awful lot of parents, particularly parents who are motivated, like you who are listening tonight, you wouldn't be here if you weren't very motivated. But the parents just don't really know what works. And so they often subscribe to what I call the pyramid model. The pyramid model, or what I also call the great Harvard fallacy. The pyramid model posits that those children will do best in life who do best every step along the way. It's sort of, the competitive society we live in. And if you want to be a happy adult, be a happy child. And if you want to be a successful adult, be a successful child. Well, on the face of it, that makes sense. But you drill down, the devil is always in the details. And you find crazy stuff happening, like in New York City, where I have an office. There is an agency that will toilet train your child by the age of 6 months. Now I don't know how they do it, put a plug up their butt, but that's just outright insanity, if not child abuse. And the reason they offer this service is to get the kids into daycare centers that would prefer toilet trained children. And then as you get older, it gets worse. There are tutoring agencies in New York City that have gotten to know the curricula of the various private schools. So if you have a child at Brearley or Dalton or one of the New York private schools, and they're only getting a B in world history, say, you can get a tutor who knows that course, knows that class, knows the exams, and pretty much guarantee you that you'll get an A. Well, the hourly fee for this tutor, hourly, mind you, hourly fee for this tutor, $1,500, $1,500 per hour. And there's a waiting list around the block. Now that's madness. It is rooted in parents' anxiety, parents' love, but most of all, parents' ignorance, because it doesn't work. Getting into Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, these parents think is the key to eternal joy, happiness, health, and fulfillment. It isn't. It just plain isn't. That's not what works. And that's really good news, because only a small percentage can go to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. The good news is that what actually does work is free and open to everyone. And that's liberating. That's liberating. So I want to liberate you, those of you who are with me tonight, from the tyranny of the pyramid model. And it forces parents into making so many wrong decisions that warp, twist, and corrupt childhood, that turn childhood into a kind of pressured pre-adulthood, as if you're always taking an entrance exam, you're always competing to get in, and the funnel is narrowing and narrowing all the way down. And if you fall by the wayside, well, woe is you. And I guess you're just going to have a C- kind of life. It is so not true. And that's really good to know. It is so not true. What does predict happiness, fulfillment, health in life are the attitudes you come out of childhood with. The attitudes. So it's attitudes, not test scores, not grades, not trophies, not captaincies, not all the list of extracurriculars you might put down. It's how you feel about yourself and about life. It's how you tackle a problem. So attitudes like self-esteem, grit, the ability to bounce back, a growth mindset that says no matter what the problem is, I can find a way to solve it. Optimism, the ability to initiate a project, to take action, to come up with something on your own. The ability to cooperate in groups. All of these are skills and attitudes that everyone can acquire. Every single child can acquire these. Everyone. And that's great news, you know. It's not dependent on IQ. It's not dependent on family income. It's not dependent on race, gender, creed. It's not dependent on any of that. What it is dependent on is how you are raised. Nurture matters. Nature, you can't alter. You've got your genes, okay? Your physical appearance, your IQ, your teeth, you know, the height. These are all genetic inborn traits. But how you are raised, how you are nurtured, has a huge impact. And that's the plan I put together in a book I called The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness. The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness. And that book, of all my books, I've written 20 books, that is my favorite book. I'm best known for my work with ADHD, but it is The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness that I think is my most, it's my favorite book, because it really does offer the truth, the very liberating truth to parents who want a plan. And it's a short book, so if you want to get it, it won't take you long to read it. And in that book, I outline the plan that I'm about to share with you. It's evidence-based, it works, and it frees you from the tyranny, the horrible tyranny of the pyramid model, of believing you've got to get your kid to be number one every step of the way. Now, if your kid is number one, that's fine, but it doesn't predict much of anything. What does predict are the attitudes they come up with. Well, Anthony told you what's on this slide, and you know, the 5 elements that are in the program. I will now proceed to go over. Can we have the next slide? These 5 concepts work in a cycle, and each one begets the next one. And as the cycle cycles, they all start operating at once. But I'll present them sequentially so you can see how one naturally leads to the next one. I think you'll resonate, because not only does scientific evidence support them, so does common sense. And in some ways, I'm kind of telling you something you already know, but I'm organizing it for you and putting it into a form where you can quickly understand it and begin to implement it. The next slide, please. The most important step is step number 1. The most important, by far, the most important force for pretty much everything that's good in life is the force of connection. At its most, we call it love. And then as it attenuates out, we call it connection. So connection to a team, connection to a group, connection to nature, connection to an institution, connection obviously to your family, your neighbors, all different kinds of connection. And multiple studies now prove, demonstrate empirically that what tells the tale in life more than any other single force is the quality of your connections, particularly your loving connections, but also your liking connections, your affiliations, your friendships, your kinships, your attachments. This is where the action is in life. This is where the payoff is in life. This is where, if you want to invest your time, imagination, resources, put them into giving your child a connected childhood, a richly, positively connected childhood. And by that, I don't mean access to the internet. I mean connection, and we'll go through different kinds of connection to give you a feel for this. But if you put your money, and it's not much money, and your time, and it is time, and your effort, and it is effort, into creating this connected childhood, the beauty of the force is that the rest takes care of itself. Now, you get a running start at birth, because the moment you become a parent for the first time, or you adopt a child for the first time, the moment you become a parent, whether it's through biological birth or adoption, the moment that happens for the first time, and all of you have experienced it because you're all listening to this talk, I've experienced it 3 times with my wife, and you enter into a permanent state of psychosis. You go crazy. you fall madly, wildly crazy in love with that little peeing and pooping machine called your baby. And think back, you remember looking at him or her and then smiling up and little spit bubbles forming on their lips, and they're moving their hands in those little funny ways and looking around and taking in the world. And you're gazing down at this baby, and a love that you've never known before is swimming into your brain, into your entire being. You almost immediately would do anything for this little baby. And you have to. You give up your sleep, you give up your money, you give up your dignity. Airports are never the same, and you plunge your hands into poop, and you think it's so great. You say, let's do it again. You come back for another one. But it is that force of unconditional, primal, animalistic, absolutely all engrossing, all engaging love that is the spinal column, if you will, of a connected childhood. That's what it all comes back to. And it ramifies out from that, but that feeling, that bond between a parent and a child, which I think is the strongest emotion in all of human existence, that it is upon that bond that we can write the stories of almost all of us. And if you look at the world's great literature, I was an English major in college, so I know a lot about the world's great literature. It's all about that relationship, the parent-child relationship. That's the furnace center of life. And that's where so much of who we are comes from. So honor that connection first and foremost. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to go through some of the elements of a connected childhood, and you should feel free to add your own as I talk. But unconditional love, and I say from someone, but it's best if it can be a parent. If it's not, okay, you find it elsewhere. But if you can get unconditional love from two parents, boy, that's awesome. From one parent, that's plenty as well. And the way you create family togetherness, let's say for the sake of argument, you have a mom and a dad and two children. You could have two dads and two children. You could have two moms and two children. You could have one parent and three children. But however many characters are in your play and whatever their genders might happen to be, that's the nuclear family, the so-called nuclear family. And that is the heart and soul of a lifetime. That's where it all begins. So how do you make that unit connected? How do you make it the shaping force that it truly should be, can be, and will be if you do this? Well, my first rule is enjoy your children. Just have fun with them. If you do that, it's almost for sure you're doing it right, unless you're smoking pot with them all day, but not many parents do that. So if you have fun with them, you're doing it right. These kids are a gift to you and you're a gift to them. Enjoy it. Spend time together. There's no substitute for time. Spend time together. Have family dinner. Studies show that family dinner increases SAT scores. How about that? And grades. So if you care about those things a lot, family dinner will increase it. Reading at bedtime will increase it. Reading aloud at bedtime, another great way to promote connection. But have fun, have picnics, go on walks, do the things that right now we can't necessarily do, but we can have picnics. And I saw a family today they said they're going to have a pool party this afternoon. And I said, oh, who are you inviting? I didn't know what. They said, it's just us, the four of us, a mom and a dad and two girls. And right now I'm sure they're having their pool party. And that's childhood. That's what childhood ought to be. Playing together, being together, arguing together. Don't think if you have arguments that something's wrong. No, you can't have intimacy without conflict. The opposite of connection is not conflict. The opposite of connection is indifference. When you're very closely connected to someone, you're going to argue. You know, I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to stay up, I want you to go to bed. I want to watch this, you can't watch that. I mean, there's going to be conflict, and sometimes intense conflict. Families can be very spirited, kids can be very spirited, and that's just fine. You work it out, you learn how to give and take, and you hold the ship together as you sail through the seas of childhood. And as a parent, you're supervising, you're guiding, but you're also vicariously enjoying. You're seeing them get some things right and get some things wrong, and you're thinking back to your own days in childhood. It's the great chance to revisit. And if you had a sort of chaotic childhood, it's a chance to get it right. I personally had a chaotic childhood, and one of the great reparative acts of my life was giving my kids the happy childhood I didn't have. And it's a wonderful feeling to get a redo, so I guess my plea here is to don't underestimate how much it counts, how much it matters, what you invest with your kids in terms of time, imagination, energy, and connecting. Could I have the next slide, please? So the connection you make to your friends, your community, it creates also the connection you make to yourself. And the goal is not that you love yourself. I think that term is overdone. I think a lot of people who love themselves really shouldn't. But the goal is to like yourself. You want your child to like him or herself enough to be real, to be open, to be honest, do not have to put on airs, not pretend to be someone you're not. And if you develop a healthy connection of I like myself and I like life, liking self, liking life, that becomes like a beating heart. It doesn't stop. I like life, I like myself, I like life, I like myself. So you're wanting, and how do you create that? It is through the force of connection. It's not by paying your child compliments, although those are fine, but what really creates that sense of liking life and liking self is starting off by having fun with your parents, and then with your friends, and then with your community at school and what have you. So then it builds on itself, and this reverberating circuit, gets going. Like me, like self, like life, like self, like life. And then I put God in there in the world of the spirit. You don't have to have a religion to develop a connection to what's beyond knowledge. And that's the world of the spirit. We live in a very scientific age, which is wonderful, but we don't want to forget that there is a world beyond knowledge. There is a world of questions that can't be answered, yet need to be asked. What is the meaning of life? What happens after we die? Why do bad things happen to good people? Those are questions with no definitive answers, but they're worth asking nonetheless. And it is in that space of wondering that the connection to the world of the spirit occurs. If you can wonder with other people, as I do when I go to church, we're Episcopalian, which is sort of like Catholic without a pope. The basic message is God is love. God is love. Where you find love, you find God. Where there's no love, God's not there. So the message is to spread love. Well, who could argue with that? And when you do it together as in a congregation and sing songs together about it and hear stories from the Bible or the Quran or whatever about it, that connection becomes important and sustaining. And I think some people, particularly educated people, shy away from religion because they had a bad experience growing up, or they don't like what can be done in organized religion. But really, you don't have to force any belief upon your child or upon yourself. One of my favorite prayers is, Lord, help me always to search for the truth, but spare me the company of those who have found it. So you don't have to subscribe to any doctrine. You don't have to subscribe to any religion. You don't have to go to a religious service. But I think it is very important that you provide some kind of spiritual connection. Could we have the next slide, please? So the next thing is to try to connect to the world outside of yourself, and through school, through maybe have a job, maybe do chores around the house, taking on responsibility. A lot of studies show that kids who grow up with chores do better in life. So it's good to sort of get the notion from early on that you pitch in and you help the cause. You're not weighted on hand and foot day and night. That you have a job to do yourself. Mom and dad have a job. You have a job to contribute, and it becomes sort of a habit. It becomes just a reflex. Yes, of course I want to contribute. And then the connection you make to school, to institutions and organizations in school. And by the connection to school, I don't mean the grades you get. I mean, how you feel when you walk in the door. Is there someone you're looking forward to seeing? Is there some activity you're looking forward to doing, even if it's just recess or lunch? Is there some positive attached to school? You don't have to love school. In fact, it's very normal for kids not to particularly like school. But you don't want to dread school. You don't want to enter the door feeling afraid, feeling like you're going to be embarrassed or humiliated. And make sure that your school does not use shame and humiliation. And that's time when parents should intervene if their child is being shamed or humiliated, because the real learning disabilities are shame and fear, not ADHD or dyslexia, both of which I have and wouldn't trade them for the world. That's another lecture. But shame and fear you acquire often in school or on the playing fields. And that can really infest your self-image for the rest of your life. You know, you never get over what happened in 6th grade or high school. And it becomes a permanent part of who you are. You know, like your grades you can think of, I'm a C student, so I'm going to have a C life, and that kind of stuff can be really crippling if you're not careful. And so that's where parents want to shepherd, advise, and intervene so that you have a comfortable connection to school. In fact, after Columbine, a huge study was undertaken called the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health, where they followed some 14,000 adolescents and looked at what were the factors. They looked at 100 different factors in these kids, massive study. And they wanted to see what would predict which kids would get into trouble and which kids would not, and which kids would do well. And the two most important factors were, number one, did the child report that he or she felt connected at home? And the connected was the word they used in the interviews. And number two, did the child report that he or she felt connected at school? More important than any other of the factors, more important than IQ, income, what kind of school, geography, none of that. Connection at home, connection at school. The kids who felt connected at home and at school rarely got into any kind of important trouble. And the kids who felt disconnected at home and at school usually got into serious kinds of trouble, from acting out to drug abuse to unwanted pregnancy to suicide attempts, the big stuff. And the kids who were connected in one and not in the other were somewhere in between. So the data, as I said, there's so much data, but the data is clear. Do whatever you need to do to create connection at home and then at school. And again, you don't have to like school, love school, all that, but you don't want to dread school. And you want to have something to look forward to, a friend and an activity. That's enough to make you golden. Okay, the next slide, please. Yes. You want to have a connection to activities and sports, ideas and information. Activities speaks for itself. The first item there, pets, though, is my favorite. Every child should have a dog, if you possibly can. A cat is okay if you must, but dogs, it's no accident that God spelled backwards is dog. Dogs are so important. If you possibly can have a dog, please have a dog. It's just such a good thing for a child to have. Dogs teach responsibility. They teach about loss when the dog dies. They teach about love. The dogs love unconditionally, and they, and loyalty. They're totally loyal. If you can have a dog, please have a dog. If you can't because of zoning or allergy, okay. But dogs are just the best way for a child to learn about connection and all the responsibilities that come with connection, leading up to finally the end of the connection when the pet dies, which usually we hope happens before the child dies. Connection to the past as well. You know, a lot of kids don't have a sense of where they're from, where their family's from, who's in their family tree, what is their ethnic identity, what is their gender identity, what is their in the past. And so a great way to encourage that is just to do a grandparent project. You know, interview your grandparents and get to know about what was life like before there were cell phones. What was life like before there were cars, if you have anyone old enough to remember that. You know, and who was this President Kennedy who got assassinated, and why did that happen? And who was this fellow Martin Luther King, and why did he get assassinated? And, you know, the discussions can just flow right out from there. So the past is another rich point of connection. Can I have the next slide, please? The world of beauty and the world of nature. And the world of beauty includes literature, dance, cinema, art, and then, of course, the world of nature itself and the natural world. And, you know, when I was a kid, what we would do is now in many ways obsolete. It was called go out and play. You'd come home from school and you'd go out and play, and it was up to you to figure out what you wanted to do. You'd supervise yourself, you'd supervise your games, you'd referee your games, and there was no mommy to go to make it all right. You figured it out. And it was a great way to learn cooperation, to learn, you know, to develop muscles of imagination and resiliency when you were disappointed or you got injured. I think it's too bad that kids, so much of their time is supervised and structured, you know, that it's all under the auspices of a coach or a teacher or a parent. And they don't have enough unstructured go outside and play. If you can possibly do that, let your kids make up their own play dates, make up their own agenda, and if a child ever says, I'm bored, just say, great, and walk away. See, boredom forces them to use their imagination. They've got to figure out something to do. If they get into mischief, okay, they get into mischief. That's part of childhood. But don't rush in when a child says, I'm bored, as if you were an attendant at the spa and you had to supply some kind of activity for them to do. The world of beauty, nature, very important connection. Next slide, please. Now, play. So once you've created this connected childhood, and I hope you added some points of connection of your own, because it is the most important force in childhood. The connected child then naturally goes into step 2, which is to play. Now, by play, I don't mean just what you do at recess. By play, I mean any activity that engages the imagination, any activity that engages the imagination. So just asking an open-ended question initiates play. Where does a circle begin and end? You know, why did grandma have to die? Why does Christmas fall on December 25th? I mean, just open-ended questions that spark curiosity. That's play. And play, in my opinion, is the highest activity of the human mind. Using your imagination, making stuff up. That's a wonderful thing to do. I spent a few years consulting to the Harvard chemistry department because they had a suicide there. And one of the things I learned, by the way, the suicides there were several of them, were all due to disconnection. Disconnection is lethal. As formative and life-saving as connection is, disconnection is the opposite. It kills people. Well, one of the things I learned there, the Harvard chemistry department has 5 Nobel Prize winners on the faculty. It's widely regarded as the best department in the world. So people apply from all over the world to come there as postdocs and grad students. And every year a new crop, 500 or so arrive in Cambridge. And the mandate is go into the lab and discover new knowledge. Well, one group runs into the lab, thrilled to have all the resources of Harvard, all the great minds, all the equipment, all the material they need, and they start playing. They start, initiating experiments. The other group freezes up. They say, you've got to tell me what to do. I'll do anything you want. I'll run your experiments. I'll do your copying. I'll teach your courses. I'll do anything you want, but you have to tell me what to do. That's the group that sadly, around 5th grade or so, they stopped playing. They got the message, if you want to do well, you'll do exactly what you're told. If you want to do well, you'll do exactly what you're told. And so they became robotic, and their imagination and their ability to take initiative atrophied. And it'll cost them, because they're losing their greatest asset, or one of their greatest assets, their imagination and their ability to initiate a project on their own without being told what to do. So encourage play. In the next slide, please. Encourage play wherever you can. Now, once you find something you like to play at, you want to play at it over and over again. That's practice. And practice that emerges out of connection and play is practice that kids, and adults for that matter, want to do. A lot of people jump in at step 3 and they say the secret to, just tell the kid to do it, tell the kid to work hard, tell the kid to practice, tell the kid. Well, if it's not coming out of connection and play, it's never going to be done with enthusiasm. If it's coming out of connection and play, then you want to go to the weight room and suffer the pain to get the gain. You want to practice scales on the violin or the piano. You want to edit the piece you just wrote, because you've experienced the joy that comes, from the connection and the play. And then you want to put in the effort, the work, to get better at it, because you know how good that feels. The next slide, please. It's practice that emerges out of connection and play, that lays down habits of discipline that actually last. And sure, you may have to nudge your child to practice, but once they get into it, they will continue to get into it. Now, certainly there are some things they just have to do because they have to do it, like brushing your teeth, boring. You have to do it. And some of learning anything is drudgery, but you want to make sure there's magic in there somewhere in order for it to continue. The next slide. Then as you work at something, you make progress. Well, mastery, which I call mastery, doesn't mean you've completely mastered it, but it's making progress at a task that is both challenging and matters to you. That is the great confidence builder. That is the great builder of self-esteem. That is the great motivator. Making progress at some activity that is both challenging and matters to you, that is gold. That is gold. People often ask me, how do I build my child's self-esteem? The best way to do it is to set him or her up in some activity and make sure that he or she makes progress. Making progress at something that is challenging and matters to them. It's got to be challenging or they'll get bored, and it's got to matter to them or they won't do it. So if they experience progress at some activity, some task, from riding a bicycle to sewing a dress to making an omelet, some progress at something that's challenging and matters to them, they will immediately grow in self-esteem, in confidence, and motivation. They want to come back for more, do it again. It feels good to do something well. It feels even better to make progress and grow. And that is the great motivator, confidence builder, life enhancer that we have. And fortunately, you can set a child up, regardless of their skill level, to make progress at something that matters to them that's challenging. The next slide. Finally, the 5th step in the cycle is recognition. And recognition not only consolidates the motivation and confidence that mastery laid down, but it also connects you to the people who are recognizing you, connects you to the group, the school, the family, the town, the team, what have you. And the great power of that is the root of moral behavior at its most organic. Moral behavior, doing the right thing when no one is looking. If you feel connected to the school, connected to the team, connected to the town, you're not going to want to break its rules because you're part owner. You're recognized. They recognize you, you recognize them. On the other hand, immoral behavior is usually committed by people who feel left out, people who feel dissed, shunned, shamed, humiliated. They feel hurt, and then they get angry and they strike back. And so if you want moral behavior, and we all do, the best way to do it is not to have people memorize the 10 Commandments. The best way to do it is to create a connected atmosphere, a connected culture, whether it's at school, at work, at home, in your town, wherever. Disconnection is toxic, but the connection that comes from recognition, people don't want to do their own thing because they don't feel injured. They don't feel greedy. They don't feel inclined to rip other people off. Well, there you have it, a 5-step cycle for raising a child that is rooted in a ton of evidence. I didn't present all the evidence because you're not here for that. But if you want to read more, get my book, The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness. And you'll see those 5 steps in action: connect, play, practice, mastery, recognition. It works. It's fun. It's self-repeating, self-fulfilling, and automatically self-renewing. I hope this made sense to you. It's a wonderful 5-step cycle. It really works. You don't have to worry about pyramids and entrance exams. It's there for everyone who wants to do it. Well, let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hallowell. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. I encourage any participants to add their questions into the Q&A portion. It's right on the bottom of your screen there. Our first question is very apropos for our time right now. How do you maintain connections in this age, as in this period of relative isolation during COVID-19? They've seen suggesting Zoom play dates. Does the lack of seeing other children in person have a negative effect on children?
Yeah, I'm afraid it does. And, we were living in a massive epidemic of disconnection even before COVID-19. I think the biggest social problem we face is disconnection. People are super connected electronically, but disconnected, increasingly disconnected interpersonally. In fact, the Surgeon General named loneliness as the #1 medical problem in the country. People feeling more alone than is good for them, more detached, more, so aside from the tremendous political turmoil that we're living through, the disconnection of people from each other is a terrible, terrible, terrible problem. And the power of connection, which I call the other vitamin C, vitamin connect, is there for the taking if you'll take it seriously. Make a point of having family dinner. Make a point of getting together with your friends regularly. Make a point of having a dog. Make a point of all the things I put in this talk. If you do that, then you won't suffer from the lack of vitamin connect. But if you don't do that, you will suffer from it. Then you throw in COVID-19, which just makes it all the much more difficult. You ask, do kids need each other in person? Yes, they do. And they suffer without it. So you make do with what you've got: Zoom play dates, Zoom appointments, and you try to tough it out until you can get back to school. But kids really need one another. They really do. And this virtual learning just isn't working. It's just not. It's the best we've got, so you have to do it. But kids need each other, and they need live in-person teachers. And the sooner we can get back to that, the better. The COVID thing has really made life very difficult. And I think it's driving home the importance of Vitamin Connect, the importance of real live people. So pay extra attention to the people you're living with. If you're allowed to go for walks and wave to people. Make that make that visual connection, and people can sense your enthusiasm in it. Now that things are opening up a little bit, if they are as they are where I live in Boston, you can go to a restaurant and eat outdoors, and just the act of being around other people will rejuvenate you. I promise you. It's remarkable how tonic, how fulfilling a big dose of vitamin C can be. And make the best with what you've got. Virtual parties and hope we can get back in person as soon as possible.
Thank you. Another related question: what do you suggest for kids with special needs who may not be able to understand or express some of these, especially the connection and the loneliness they face in society by peer rejection?
Yeah, you don't have to be able to articulate it to learn it. And you really can teach social interaction. This social learning is become a very hot topic. Um, Caroline McGuire is a colleague of mine who's written a wonderful book, Why Will No One Play With Me? And I'd recommend it highly to you. She goes right through how to introduce social learning to a child of any diagnosis, any capability, any condition, and because everyone can learn it. Everyone can learn it as long as it's approached in the right way. Caroline McGuire, Why Will No One Play With Me? It's a wonderful book.
Okay, thank you for that. What are some important things teachers can do in the classroom when family life isn't providing that closeness?
Well, again, teachers, when they can get back into classrooms, can't make up for what's going on at home or what's not going on at home. What they can do is be the best teacher they can be. And not only teaching, but recognizing kids, and the kids who they know are having a hard time at home, just give them extra looks, extra words, extra touches, extra attention. I mean, I was saved by teachers, no doubt about it. I would have been really messed up had it not been for the wonderful teachers I had all along the way. I'm one of the very few people you'll ever find who can say, I honestly never had a bad teacher. And I had many great teachers. And teachers they don't realize how important they are, particularly in kids like me who aren't getting what we need at home. If we can get it from a teacher, that makes up for it. It really does. And I was sent away to boarding school in the 5th grade, so I was 10 years old at boarding school. Well, thank goodness I was, because what was going on at home wasn't good, and what happened at the school I was sent to was wonderful. I had wonderful teachers, wonderful classmates, good education. It was saved me, absolutely saved me. So be a good teacher, but make relationships with your kids. Get to know them, get to know a little bit about them. And the ones who really need you, they don't come with signs around their neck saying, I need you, but you can feel it, you can sense it. And it's one of the reasons that teaching is such a noble profession. It's much more than book learning. All the book learning matters for sure, but the emotional learning and the relationships you create and the mentors you discover are life-changing, as they certainly were for me.
Okay. The next question is really about what you had mentioned about hobbies and mastering some skills that might be new to the child. The question is, what if mastery still requires some rote practice, like doing singing exercises? For instance, what if the child likes to sing but does not do voice exercises or voice scales as prescribed?
Well, you try and induce them to do it, and whatever it takes. And bribery is certainly in the repertoire. Any expert who says you shouldn't bribe children doesn't have children. It's impossible to raise kids without bribing them. And you try to sweeten the pot. If you do your voice exercises, and then you can negotiate the reward. But it is a fact that to get good at anything, there is a drudgery element to it. What doesn't work is lectures on that. Lectures about how in order to get good at anything, you have to suffer. That's an instant turnoff. But if you can distract them from what they don't like about it, time it in such a way that they do it, and as soon as they start getting better, then they'll see the payoff. As soon as the voice lessons pay off, then they'll want to do it. But to get them going, don't let them. The thing to avoid at all costs, don't let them use avoidance as a coping style, because then the next thing you know, they won't persist with anything. So if push comes to shove, you say, well, you just have to do it, but you don't want to play that card very often.
Understandable. Do you have any tips for helping twins recognize their own strengths when the strengths are completely different? other than the general praising and engaging in activities with them?
Well, the best way for anyone, twins or not, to find their strengths is to do as many things as you can. And you'll find that you do some things really well, and then you'll tend to want to keep doing those. So it's exposing them to as many activities as you can, and then let the enthusiasms develop.
Absolutely. Okay. This, I feel like, is right up your alley. How can you teach resilience to a child with ADD who has trouble regulating his emotions?
Well, you want to make sure you get the ADD treated properly. And obviously that's what I'm known for. So get one of my books, but you want to present it to the child as a potential asset. I tell kids, you're very lucky. You've got a Ferrari engine for a brain. I say, but the problem is you have bicycle brakes. So race car brain with bicycle brakes is a wonderful way of looking at it. And then the kid is motivated to strengthen his brakes. And when he makes a mistake, instead of saying you bad boy or you stupid kid, you say your brakes failed you. Your brakes failed you. Well, that's not shaming, because he knows he's got these brakes he needs to work on. So he says, okay, I'm going to work hard to strengthen my brakes. And as you strengthen your brakes, you'll have more successes. You won't, spin out on curves.
That's a great analogy. Similarly, what tips do you have for helping an ADHD teen push herself to make a friend at school?
Well, usually that's its own incentive. Kids want to make friends, and you can do some role playing, you can do some coaching, you can say who would, and just have a conversation. It's usually not a matter of motivation so much as it is of technique. Most kids, with some exceptions, want to make friends, and so what they lack is a technique. And that's where you can coach them on how to make small talk, or how to approach someone and when to approach someone. And this is what parenting is all about.
Absolutely. What if my child, grade 10, felt that her classmates are all doing well, but she's just not that great, both in academics and sports?
Find something that she likes away from school, not academic, not a sport. Something that she likes: cooking, sewing, horseback riding, building castles in the sand. I mean, anything that can be something where she can develop some proficiency.
That's a good one. Another question that came in: how do you create a happy atmosphere when the child starts to fixate and is constantly criticizing the other siblings and parent?
It's hard, but you want to, be the conductor of the symphony, redirect, intervene, bring up something different, designate an activity. Don't let the negative continue uninterrupted. You don't have to get angry, you don't have to punish, but you want to redirect.
Mm-hmm. Distract.
Right.
This is a question I believe a lot of parents can identify with. How do you stop your child who's addicted to playing video games?
Take it away. I mean, you really do have to learn how to set limits on this stuff. It's like, the analogy is with food. We all need to eat, and we all need to use video. It's a part of life, the childhood, that you've got to have. But you don't want to overeat, and similarly, and you don't want to eat junk food. So you want to make sure the video usage is high quality and not too much. And it's a major struggle with some kids. So don't shy away from it. Don't abdicate. You got to hang in there, and you just got to. The best thing to do is just have a policy that you and the child agree to, and monitor it in yourself as well. A lot of parents are spending way too much time on screens too. So you want to have a policy, have a contract. So it's the contract that sets the rules, not the mood you're in. And recognize that it's a really important part of parenting these days.
Absolutely. And as you know, parenting never ends. So our next question is, what if adults are now 20-something millennials who don't want to spend time with mom or siblings?
It's their life. They don't have to. You want to have enough inducements so you can spend some time together, but compelling them to be there is the last resort. You want to attract them and understand that if they're going through a phase where they want to be very independent, that's okay. They're doing that for some reason. And if you've done the work of connecting early on, they'll be back. Don't worry about that.
That's great. We do have one.
We've got to end this up pretty soon, okay? Because I'm being called in another direction.
No worries. This is our last question.
Okay.
This one's a little bit off topic, but on the topic of ADHD. With the APA recently lowering ADHD testing recommendations to 4 years old, how do you find practitioners willing to test at such a young age?
Well, you don't need the test is the short answer to it. There is no test for ADD. Everyone thinks there's a test. There isn't one. Neuropsych testing is always interesting, helpful, and I get it whenever the person can afford it. But the diagnosis is based on your history. It's based on behavioral observation, your history, your family history. You don't need the very expensive, complicated, time-consuming neuropsych testing. If you can get it, great. But it's not how the diagnosis is made. And a lot of people think, oh, I was tested. There isn't a test. So if you just see a doctor who knows what he or she is doing, the diagnosis resides in the history.
Absolutely. We do have a couple more questions that came in, but
I've got to get going. I really do. I've got to get going. But if you want to throw me one more, I'll stay for that.
Sure. Is there a reason why children will downplay and even reject things they clearly enjoy once a parent starts to show encouragement?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They don't want to be owned. They don't want to, be the dancing monkey. They don't want to do what. And so if the parent gets all excited about it, then they'll walk away from it. So there's a lot of psychology involved in this. You want the kid to own the thing and not get the feeling that he's doing it to please you. And if he senses that, it's like a salesman who's too aggressive. You go in the other direction. So let the child's enthusiasm grow on its own. Now, you certainly applaud, encourage, but do it gently. Don't jump out of your skin with it.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Hallowell.
Thank you, and thank you all who are listening. Thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone,
Bye-bye.
for joining us. Take care.